How's it going, guys? Cracked Rack here, and today we're going to be talking about the one and only Christian Weston Chandler once again.
Oh no, not again.
Now, this is the last Chris Chan video I'm going to make for a little while, just because I've been making a ton, and I don't want my regular viewers to think that's all I'm ever going to commentate on. I have so much to commentate on, it's not even funny, but for today, we're going to talk about Chris Chan and the mental illnesses he has and the ones he may possibly have. Now, I need to mention before we get into this that I am not a psychologist in any way, shape, or form. However, I have been closely studying and observing Chris for the better part of 10 years now, and I can say for sure that I have a general idea of the mental illnesses Chris may have that haven't been diagnosed yet because he hasn't gone to a psychologist in literal ages because he's pretty much dropped out of society. Again, I hope I don't sound like I'm trying to diagnose anyone or act like a medical professional. I'm just taking the information we all know about Chris and using it to conduct some basic reasoning of what general illness Chris may have. Now, before we speculate, let's talk about the illness he certainly does have. Chris has very low functioning autism, and it's extremely important to mention the low functioning part because a lot of autistic people are actually really furious about Chris parading the fact he has autism around. This is because by doing this, it makes it seem like regular autistic people are just as bad as Chris, when this just isn't the case at all. Autistic people most of the time can't even be differentiated from regular people on the street unless you actually interact with them. I have a mild form of Asperger's myself, and I don't relate to Chris at all. I personally just am obsessed with YouTube and computers and don't really socialize that much. That's the full extent of my autism. Chris, on the other hand, has very, very low functioning autism, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people who do suffer from this. However, Chris takes it to a whole other planet with his autism. Chris's autism seemingly makes it to where he thinks he's invisible and can do whatever he wants and dress however he wants and act however he wants without any consequences. For example, like the time Chris tried to murder the owner of a card game hangout spot with his car violently because said owner didn't want Chris coming back there anymore. I wonder why. It's almost like Chris has a horrible habit of stalking, harassing, and assaulting people who even mildly inconvenience him and don't stroke his ego. Another part of Chris's autism is that because he gets his ego stroked so much online because trolls will pretend to like him to make him feel better, he genuinely believes that's how he should be treated in real life, and it's gotten him in a lot of trouble. Hell, he went to court a few days ago, and in the first court hearing he told the judge he was internet famous and stomped his feet when the judge didn't give a fuck. This is all very egotistical, low-functioning autism behavior, and I think it comes from having an autistic child that you don't take care of very well. Like, if you have a low-functioning autistic child and you don't take the necessary precautions to give them healthy coping mechanisms and shit as they grow, they can end up like Chris and live in their own little bubble where they don't care who they hurt or how. Chris is also absurdly awkward in any given social situation. Just look at the infamous picture of him standing next to that girl Megan, who was his love interest for a long time. Looks like he's gonna fucking eat her alive. So yeah, the first mental illness Chris undeniably has is low-functioning autism. But what else does he have? Like I said, not a psychologist, but I definitely am in the market of believing that Chris may be suffering from some kind of schizophrenia. This is a mental illness that Chris has only recently started to show signs of in the last 7 years or so. See, for the most part, Chris from like 2000 to 2010 was still a mildly reasonable human being. Yes, he was a disgusting degenerate who did horrible things, like he would jizz inside of a cup of Fanta and drink it because he thought it was recycling his kids, but he still had a basic grasp on reality. For example, like in 2010, Chris could tell you who the current president was, he could form a cohesive and long opinion on one of his interests, and he still had some dignity in terms of wanting to look like a regular person. He was a horrible man, but he was still a man that could be reasoned with. However, something happened to Chris after the age of 30 that just really fucked him up. He became a complete shell of who he used to be. First, Chris announced he was a tom girl in like 2011, I believe, and that's when he started cross-dressing. Around this time, Chris just started to lose his grip on reality. Suddenly, he started to become very agitated and angry and was assaulting people every once in a while over the pettiest of shit. Chris would throw genuine tantrums over things that just weren't a big deal and wouldn't be a big deal to anyone for any reason. For example, the whole reason Chris pepper sprayed that GameStop employee back in 2014 was because Sonic's arms in the new Sonic game were blue instead of tan. This infuriated Chris so much he went on that whole rampage that could have ruined his entire life. So I would say 2014 was definitely the year Chris was starting to lose his fucking marbles. Then, as the years went on, Chris's sentences on social media just became incoherent. Chris's statements used to be pretty cohesive and easy to understand, and his statements, while crazy as shit, still made sense on a base level. However, like I was saying, as the years went on, Chris's sentences anywhere he posted became extremely disorganized, had nothing to do with reality or current events, and were also extremely long, some of his tweets being altogether pages long of just nonsense. And from what I know about schizophrenic people, this is all in line with having some kind of schizoid-esque personality disorder. Also, schizophrenia does start to manifest severely in one's early 30s, and that is exactly the same time frame Chris started to lose it. He's 39, nearly 40 now, FYI. Chris also, as of the last few years, started talking nonsense about fictional characters, stating that fictional characters are actually real and live in another dimension, and that one day, the dimensions will merge and reality and fiction will be no different from one another. This is pretty clear schizophrenic thinking, it's just nonsense that Chris literally believes in religiously. Chris has also developed an awful habit that's been incubating inside of him for nearly 2 decades. That being, he has full conversations with himself and his imagination out loud. He will have out loud extremely obnoxious conversations in public with Sonichu, his Sonic OC. This is definitely not something new. Chris has been doing mild forms of this for a while, but it's getting so severe, Chris does it constantly even when in court. If Chris does have schizophrenia, it is getting extremely severe. For example, a couple of years ago, Chris decided to get extremely drunk and slice his taint open with a knife so that it would be an open wound that he could pretend was a vagina. He refers to it as the unclit. He still, to this day, has that open wound and it's infected as shit. This is some schizophrenic ass thinking, and if it is confirmed to be schizophrenia, Chris is a dangerous man if he's able to stab his fucking taint open just because he had a thought of doing so. Anyway, overall, the answer to the question what mental illness does Chris have is low-functioning autism and very likely some kind of schizoid disorder. His behavior has certainly gotten far worse as time's gone on, and I'm honestly scared for the future. If Chris is this bad now, he's only going to be 10 times worse in 20 years when he's 60. Anyway, that's all for today. If you liked the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. See ya.